Two SEC teams stand at a crossroads heading into week 7 for Tennessee. All expectations still reside on making it into the college football playoff. And a loss to Arkansas might seem bitter, but everything is still in front of them. But for Florida, who has found a way to continuously be the thorn in Tennessee's side, this might be the moment where it all comes together for Billy Napier. But who walks away with the win on Saturday night at Neyland Stadium? Let's just talk about it. Welcome on into SEC Unfiltered. He's Dave Shumate. I'm Cole Thompson. Breaking down everything we'll see as the Florida Gators travel to Rocky Top to take on the Tennessee Volunteers. Real quickly, make sure that you hit that subscribe button and the ring notification down below because this is your #1 source for all things SEC moving forward. Download the podcast version of the show wherever you get your podcast listening systems. Follow us on the social channels, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at SEC Unfiltered. Follow Dave at Mock10 Sports, me at Mr. Cole Thompson, and check out all of our great work found at SECUnfiltered.com. This preview is brought to you by our friends over at GameTime. Download the GameTime app and use the promo code SECU for $20 off your first purchase. Whether it be going to a game in Neyland Stadium, whether it be traveling down to the swamp, whether it be just catching a concert, maybe not Taylor Swift, but certainly one of the more high-key profile figures, go ahead and download the GameTime app and use the promo code SECU for $20 off with your first purchase. Dave, regardless of anything that goes on between these two squads during the regular season, regardless of what the number is attached next to their names, regardless of who's playing quarterback, who is #1 in recruiting, who's winning in the transfer portal, it does feel like this has been Florida's game to lose. 8-2 over the last 10 years. The 2 times they did lose, it was by double digits. This has always been a game that kind of sits in the face of Tennessee fans that they know that they have to get over the hump. And you and I talked about this during the offseason, really leading up to week 1. The most important game for Josh Heupel in 2024, regardless of Alabama, Georgia, now a loss to Arkansas, it's getting over the hump of what is the Florida Gators, who has continuously been taking bits and chomps out of their side en route to hopefully being back into the conversation of national relevancy.
Yeah, I mean, this goes back to Florida's dominance in this series since Spurrier arrived in the early 90s. Thorne and Philip Fulmer's side usually, Peyton Manning never beat Florida. So this goes back 2+ decades from this standpoint. But you feel like this is the year, you're right, this is year 4 for Josh Heupel, year 3 for Billy Napier. I think, again, on paper, I think you're watching teams. You feel like Tennessee's the better team. They get them at home. I understand Tennessee's coming off a bounce back, a loss off against Arkansas where they have to bounce back at home. They'll be at home for the next couple of weeks. You're right. You drop this one, you're going to have some people in Knoxville, I think, starting to question really the direction of the program. This would be the year. You can't afford a loss to Florida this year because I still think, and again, Florida probably played their most complete game of the year so far. I think against a very underwhelming UCF team that we've seen over the last 2 weeks against Colorado and Florida. Again, they're coming in feeling as good as they can, but still, if you're Tennessee, you lose this one this year, you're almost sitting there like, dude, we're never going to beat these guys. Like, we've been the better team the last 2 years, and they've beaten us. I know Cooper Mays was out last year. That made a big difference. But it's like you're saying, this is Florida's controlled this series going back to the early 90s. This year specifically, 2024, I still think Tennessee's the better team. I know people are upset in Knoxville about what happened on Saturday night against Arkansas. Florida's coming in with some momentum. But this is, like you said, a couple of weeks ago, this kind of, at least for me, I know Florida's dominated the series, but specifically this year, I kind of like, all right, Tennessee will win that game. Let's go. You're looking forward. If they can beat Arkansas, you're like, all right, they'll roll into the Alabama game undefeated. That'll be a big one. Obviously, they lost to Arkansas. Now you got some more issues that are rearing its ugly head. Maybe Florida can take advantage of them. We'll break it down. But you're right. This looks to be a little bit more of a worrisome game with how the offense has been playing if you're a Tennessee fan.
Dave, honestly, I was not worried about them losing this game if it eventually did happen. Somehow, some way, there are teams just allergic to other opponents. Look at Kentucky and South Carolina. Absolutely, people would still be picking the Wildcats over the Gamecocks, but Mark Stoops is allergic to Beamer ball. That's just kind of the case. It may be that way that Rocky Top is allergic to Gator. We don't know, but you can't lose to Arkansas, then lose to Florida, and then put yourself in a winner-take-all situation where you have to go get marquee matchup wins over both Alabama and the third Saturday in October, and then travel down to Sanford Stadium to take on Georgia. You can't do it. Let's talk about Tennessee. It wasn't the prettiest game. I personally think of the defense. The front seven did its job for the most part. Jaquindon Jackson had a few physical runs. You also look at how they were able to kind of mitigate the runs from Taylen Green, the passing attack. There were a couple of deep shots, but it was overall pretty consistent. The offense is where I had a lot of concern in this game, because you look back, you're holding a team like Arkansas on the ground with Braylon Russell, Jaquindon Jackson, and even Taylen Green to 3.1 yards per play. 9 times out of 10, you're walking away with a win in that situation. But your offense, which has been one of the more top-heavy, gung-ho, let it fly, but also let it be physical on the ground attacks, it kind of was stable in this game. It was kind of stale a little bit. You never saw kind of that momentum really pick off. Yeah, you had a few big-time runs from Dylan Sampson, and you averaged 4.8 yards, but your passing attack was limited. And I don't think it was just Nico. I mean, as much as we want to put pressure on a young quarterback for living up to these sky-high 1998 T. Martin, Peyton Manning-esque expectations, there were multiple drop balls. There were multiple rounded out routes. There were multiple plays where you're watching a receiver not finish at the very top of the route tree, and then it eventually leads to a 3 and out. So when you look back at that game, what exactly, in your opinion, went wrong for Tennessee up in Fayetteville?
Well, first, you got to give Travis Williams credit. Like we've talked
a lot of credit.
Shows on that. And Arkansas's defensive line, again, you had Cam Ball, Eric Gregory were having big games. But I think Tennessee's offensive line is an issue right now. They've not been really playing great all year for really the most part. I mean, John Campbell's been banged up some. Lance Hurd's been banged up. Even Cooper Mays looked like he was limping around a little bit late in that game. They just have not been able to hold up on the offensive line for the most part. And then Nico's just not comfortable inside the pocket. I think he has a little right now, and I think you agree with this too, Cole. Nico Iamaleava is going to be fine. He's going to be a good player
100%.
down the line. I just think right now he reminds me a little bit of how Jalen Milroe was last year, just trying to stay in the pocket, trying to make every play vertically. But in reality, man, if it's 3rd and 5, 3rd and 7, dude, you're like, I mean, we've all seen the volleyball highlights of him in high school. Like, dude, you were an athletic dude. You were a long strider. Get outside the pocket. Go make some plays with your legs, because you know what? When you make plays outside the pocket and you're extending plays horizontally, that's going to bring the 2nd level, 3rd level defenders up to try to come make a play on you. And, hey, maybe when you're just right before the line of scrimmage, that safety bails on his receiver to maybe come make a tackle on you, you can hit your safety over there. I mean, maybe it's Nimrod, maybe it's Webb. I don't know. I mean, they're banged up at the receiver spot as well. But I think that adds another dynamic to this passing game overall that I don't think he's quite accepted yet. Because, again, he's only a redshirt freshman. He's only started, 6, 7 games at this point, going back to the
We're talking
Iowa.
about 7 games. Going
back to the bowl game against Iowa. I think he needs to start extending his legs for the most part. I think that would really benefit the entire offense, and I think it would let Josh Heupel a little bit take what's the best way? It feels like Cole, you told me from wrong here. But there's some still a little like training wheels on this offense a little bit, where it's like, I get it, you've had injuries and stuff, you had a first-time starter, but for Tennessee ultimately to reach their ultimate goals, to either go win an SEC championship, go in the playoffs, win a national championship, Nico's going to have to start playing well here at some point as they start facing better opponents.
But the other thing is, are you right? Is it the training rules still being on him and they're saying, let's just go ahead and get the dink and dunk passes off? Or is it, no, we're going to let you fly and it's now you're making the mistakes? The thing that you look at with Jalen Milroe that's really, really poignant, especially if you go back and watch that Alabama game, you watch at times in that Wisconsin game, his 3rd read is the run. That has been a huge blessing in disguise for Alabama's passing attack. It's that we're going to go to Ryan Williams. If Ryan Williams isn't open, we'll look for Jeremy Bernard. That's my number 2 read. If both those guys are covered and I don't see a crease to be able to get the ball out, I'm tucking and running and going for 6 points. That has been the MO. And I think that's where Nico kind of has to start playing a little bit more. And I agree with you. It's because of what you just said. What if a safety bites and you get a Chris Brasso open across the middle of the field? What if you get a Miles Kitselman open up? What if you get a Holden Stace? What if you get a Brew McCoy? A Mike White for that matter?
I thought he had Nimrod open in the back of the end zone on the last play of the game.
And so when you see those opportunities where you start getting the safety to kind of play and go for the bait, that opens up your passing attack to where that is a 3rd read. And I do think that does play a big deal. You are right about the offensive line. I still think Tennessee's offensive line, with the current 6 potential stars they have, is better than most in the SEC. The thing that we have not talked a lot about, Dave, and maybe it's only because of we're only paying attention to the SEC, but offensive line play has been exceptionally down throughout college football this year, and it's taken a lot longer to kind of build that cohesive balance. Look at Ole Miss. Ole Miss went out and spent a ton of money on building its trenches, and they still had troubles against Dylan Stewart, against Deion Walker, against Kentucky's front seven, against South Carolina's front seven. Go to the Big Ten. We talk about Oregon. Oregon felt like a national championship contender at the start of the year. Their offensive line has been probably one of the biggest disappointments in the sport for 2024. So I still like where Tennessee's offense is. I still like where Tennessee's offensive line is. I like that they have a guy that can be a swing personnel member all across 4 different positions. But you are right. Injuries start to stockpile. You're starting to see younger players have to get more extensive reps. And that's not a benefit for them. Not even a little bit. I will say, people are going to say, and I know that you're one that has said, you've been waiting to see Tennessee's secondary get tested. I thought Tennessee's secondary got tested in Fayetteville in that atmosphere, and they walked away pretty unscathed because they didn't allow a touchdown through the air. I think that you're going to see a more complete version of the passing attack in this matchup with either DJ Lagway or Graham Mertz. But I don't really worry about that at this point when it comes to the coverage skills. I don't. And I think that so many people have been commenting, why are we talking about Tennessee secondary? Why are we talking about Tennessee secondary? You know what I'm starting to question? Tennessee's tackling. Because Tennessee's open field tackling at the second and third level was atrocious last week. And maybe it was just great blocking and great execution by Arkansas, who, by the way, fought their way into a physical bout to make sure they walked away with the win. They did. They 100% did. But how many misdirections, how many terrible reads to the football, how many bad angles, how many arm tackles did you watch from multiple Volunteers in that game to where you saw a 3rd and 8 turn into a 1st and 10? And that's something that I think has to be corrected in this matchup, because the last thing you want to do is go up against a team that we make fun of all the time for not being able to tackle, and they look better form-fitting tackling than you do.
Yeah. No, you're 100%. I mean, I think the only team, and again, Florida played well defensively last week, so give Ron Roberts, Austin Armstrong credit for that. UCF was the poor tackling team last week, especially, I mean,
2 weeks in a row.
Tackling team on the field that day. But you're right. You mentioned offensive line play across the board. I feel like at all levels isn't great right now compared to what we've seen in the past. And again, to the point of tackling, I think tackling's really down across the sport. I mean, Georgia, who we usually see as one of the best tackling teams in the country year to year, they miss a ton of tackles now. I just don't think teams practice it as much because they're trying to get kids to game day. But yeah, to your point, I don't know. I'm with you. I think Tennessee's defense is fine. It's not a concern. Again, they don't have any concerns in the secondary that other teams don't have either. That's the thing. I'm breaking down games and stuff. I'm like, man, they got some questions on the back end. But you go back and look at other teams too, and you're like, yeah, well, they do too. I mean, I would say the only team
Tennessee has
questions, I really trust in the league is probably Oklahoma, because I think they got some decent depth on the back end. But everybody else, and again, it's not really. I mean, yeah, you can blame Josh Heupel, you can blame a coaching staff, but it is what it is in today's time, dude. You play nickel, you play dime a lot, you're playing 5-6 DBs. Kids, the 7th, 8th guy does not want to hang around. He wants to go somewhere and start. So your depth, just like at the quarterback position for a lot of teams, it's true freshmen. I mean, it's just young cats that are going to get exposed at times. I think that's just kind of the nature we are in college football. But to our point, Tennessee's defense secondary is definitely improved. It's the best secondary Heupel has had, I would say.
For sure.
And a guy like Jamad McCoy is definitely the best defensive back he's had since he's been in high school.
If Tennessee has secondary problems, Alabama has secondary problems, Georgia has some secondary problems, LSU has some secondary problems, Texas may or may not, depending on this weekend against Oklahoma does. Teams have secondary problems. I don't worry about Tennessee's secondary right now. What I worry about is the open field tackling, the terrible angles of the football that turn a 3rd and 8 into a 35-yard gain, and now you're setting up into a field goal. Let's talk about Florida. Florida, as you mentioned, I went back and I watched the tape. That felt like the most complete game for Billy Napier at home in 2 years. That also felt like a very good executed game plan, knowing where the strengths and weaknesses were with this team. You didn't force anything big for DJ Lagway, 4 for 4 in the passing attack, 19 and 23 for Graham Mertz. You averaged 4.1 yards on the ground. Montrell Johnson back was able to find his way into the end zone for a big time run. You also got to see Jacoby Jackson get more involved. Shamir Dike kind of stepped up in this game. Elijah Badger had that big touchdown grab. This is the version of Florida that I think many of us envisioned at the start of the year when they were playing against Miami, when they were playing against Texas A&M, that would be able to at least make things interesting. Maybe you don't walk away with the win. Maybe you don't find a way to capitalize and pull out the marquee upset. But what you do is you play a brand of football that shows progress and potential and why Billy Napier is the right guy for the job. That being said, we also have to keep into consideration that this UCF team that was able to come back against TCU, that win is starting to look more and more like fool's gold. And the reality of what we saw against them playing Colorado, what we saw against them playing Florida, might be who they are as a program. They'll get the Gus Malzahn special at the end of the year. It just didn't come down in the swamp. There are still questions. But the good news is, I think for this standpoint, Billy has what is going to be the backbone and the persona of this offense. We're going to run drills where it's 2 drives for Graham, 1 drive for DJ. We're going to trust his legs. We're going to trust his mobility. We're going to make sure that we take pressure off of him. It is Tennessee, though. And Tennessee's defensive front, headlined by James Pierce, headlined by Peely, headlined by multiple players who are going to be future NFL Sunday stars, is a lot different than UCF. The level of talent is going to be there. I wonder in this game, what is going to be the game plan when it comes to, okay, we see that Graham made a mistake. We see that DJ made a mistake. Do we ride it out with Graham at this point because we don't want to put more pressure on DJ to have to overexceed? Or do we just trust what the game plan is right now? We're doing the 2, then the 1, the 2, the 1. Because I think that the quarterback system works. I do. I'm actually starting to buy into it a little bit. What I'm not buying into is when things start to go south, you put pressure on a young quarterback down by 10 to have to be the reason why now you're down by 3. I just don't like that, and I don't like that in an environment like Neyland Stadium where you and I both know that sound travels up, that sound does not have an exit, it bellows back down, and it leads to a ton of missed calls, it leads to a ton of false starts, it leads to a ton of penalties, and that place, because of this game, this rivalry, will be hollering loud. That place will be as ravenous as it's been all season long.
Yeah, I think it concerns me a little bit about Florida. I'm with you. I mean, I think this fits into what they need to do this year. Each team's different. I don't mind the rotation, and I think a guy like DJ Lagway who can move around a little bit could help against a team against Tennessee, like you said, that has some eye discipline on the back end, misses some tackles. But I will say, I mean, Florida didn't score a point in the second half against UCF. Now, they only had 3 possessions, about 3 real possessions, but for the most part, UCF controlled the time of possession in the second half. Florida did. I mean, they were up 24-3 at half, and they won the game 24-13. So the offense didn't really build off what they really did in the first half. So that concerns you a little bit. I feel like if you're a Florida fan, you still got some issues on that offensive side of the ball, especially in the offensive line, and you're going up against probably the best defense. I mean, give or take them or A&M that you've seen all year.
Maybe I would say the best defensive line.
Yeah.
Okay, actually, no.
Well, you're splitting hairs. Them and
A&M. A&M's the best defensive line. Tennessee's the best defense. I think that's a fair statement. Or even so, you're splitting hairs at this point.
You're splitting hairs at both. I mean, it's not something Florida hadn't seen, but again, they played A&M at home. So to your point, Cole, it'll be a little different when you're on the road, hostile environment, and you're playing this Tennessee defense. So I'll give this specific game. This will be Florida's biggest challenge from an offensive standpoint of going on the road. I mean, this is their only other road game outside of Mississippi State, right? Yeah. So it's their only other road game outside of Mississippi State. So this will be their toughest challenge. I think when you factor in where it is, the opponent, the improved defense by Tennessee, the defensive front 7. So yeah, they got to fix what they did in the second half. I understand they didn't get a lot of possessions. UCF for whatever reason controlled the clock. I was watching the game too. I was like, are they just trying to cover the spread here, or are you trying to come back? But they didn't give Florida outside of real 3 possessions. So they got to fix that. Defense, I thought, improved for Florida. Again, I thought KJ Jefferson wasn't awesome, but they gave him some looks he hadn't seen before. That defense is going to have to probably go match or exceed what they did this week if they want to go win. And again, that was against a struggling Tennessee offense. But I think if you told me Florida won this game, I would have a hard time not seeing that front 7 for Florida playing really well again. If you told, I don't think Florida's just going to go out there and outscore Tennessee. I think Florida's defensive line, front 7 would be the storyline if Florida were to pull the upset.
KJ Jefferson is a completely different quarterback than Nico, but they're both going to be mobile. The fact that you have a kind of blueprint on trusting what this ground game can be with Dylan Sampson and the way that you were able to mostly control RJ Harvey, Penny Boone in this matchup maybe did bode well in your favor. I mean, they averaged 2.7 yards per play. That is the ultimate sign of Austin Armstrong and Ron Roberts kind of channeling in, hey, we're Florida. We're known for this gator chomp bite defensive front 7. Let's go ahead and attack like no one's business. Like that's kind of the MO, because this was the number 1 rushing attack a few weeks ago in college football. And they basically shut them down and forced KJ Jefferson to pass. That being said, KJ Jefferson and Nico, the upside of Nico is far more gratuitous than what you see with KJ Jefferson at this point. KJ Jefferson was basically asked politely, hey, it's not working out. We're breaking up with you at Arkansas. Go join forces with somebody else in a rebound with the hot shake down in Florida. Like, that's kind of what it felt like when he left Arkansas after his overall pretty promising career with the Hogs. I do wonder, though, if you're Nico and you can start to attack the way that we saw UCF attack, is this going to be a game where Florida doesn't go into the fourth quarter and they're kind of gassed? Because if we can also just call the truth what it is, Big 12 opponents, a lot of new transfers, a lot of big-time names that we remember from the MAC, big-time names that we remember who were lesser tier in the SEC. Those are the ones that reside down at the bounce house in Orlando. Those are the type of players that you're going to see on Saturdays underneath Gus Malzahn with the Knights. This is Tennessee. Tennessee has the weapons. Tennessee also has, I think, the right personnel to be able to go 4 quarters and not feel gassed. Does Florida have that second wind similar to what we saw when they played against Mississippi State, similar to what we saw when they played against UCF? Or is it going to be kind of like how we looked at Texas A&M game, where you get a big drive, Shamir DK, Elijah Badger get 40 yards down the field, they're into the end zone, and then we watch as Cyrus Allen walks in 57 yards, and it's like, oh, all that momentum's gone. And then the same thing, instead of Cyrus Allen, it's a Holden Stays, it's a Miles Kitselman, it's a Chris Brazzell, it's a Mikey Matthews having a breakout game. Is that what we're going to see in Rocky Top? That fourth quarter comes, and they're just so gassed, they're trying to get on out of there where it's not embarrassing.
Yeah, I mean, it's something to keep an eye on too with the tempo. Some of that's going to be Florida. I think is going to have to try to possess the football some a little bit. And like I said, if Florida's defensive line is going to have to play really well to keep them in this game in the fourth quarter.
Dave, you and I always do this when we work together. We pick one player from each side that we're going to go ahead and target, player to watch for. I will go first with Tennessee. The wide receiver core, as good as it is, has been a little underwhelming. I think that you and I both can agree that Brew McCoy, Dante Thornton, they've had some moments where it's looked really promising. They've also had some moments where it wasn't that great. I mean, Dante Thornton in this game had 1 catch for 42 yards and Brew McCoy had 2 for 9. Somebody has got to step up. And for my money in this matchup, I kind of want to see the youth movement approach. I kind of want to see the young gun who they believe can be a difference maker. And if you go back and you watch that game against not Chattanooga, who was the other game they played? I can't believe I'm playing on it.
They played Kent State.
Kent State. Yeah, if you remember that Kent State game, Mike Matthews, the 4-star out of Georgia, kind of came on into his own late in the second quarter and starting in the third quarter. I want to see what he can bring. Because if there comes a point where you start looking at these older receivers and go, listen, they have experience, they have talent, they have all the upside in the world to be here and now. But Ryan Williams is doing things down in Tuscaloosa that is making Alabama's passing attack better. Ryan Wingo is forcing his way to get involved for Texas's passing attack. We got to see what Jeremiah Smith is. We're watching what Cardell Tate is. We're watching what some of these young playmakers out at SMU or out at USC are making. It's time for us to kind of say, listen, we got to play what works best for our team. And Matthews, when he touches the football, has been really promising. So I think he is going to have a game plan in this to where he gets involved. I want to see what he does. And then for Florida, I'm really interested in this one because I don't know who is going to be playing, who isn't. But I do think there is something interesting about a guy like R.J. Moten at linebacker. I think that him being able to play, whether it be against Dylan Sampson, whether it be against Nico Iamaleava, he had a pretty overall solid day against UCF. There's a certain similar identity. It's a completely different offense down there from what Heupel used to run to what Malzahn runs now. But they still predicate the run. They still put an emphasis on setting up the run to create the pass. They still have the opportunity to have a mobile quarterback. If Moten can do what he did against KJ Jefferson and Penny Boone and against RJ Harvey, I wonder what he's going to look like when he has to go up against Nico Iamaleava and Dylan Sampson. So those are my two. Mikey Matthews on offense for Tennessee. I'm going to go RJ Moten for Florida on defense.
For Tennessee to lead us off, and I think to your point, Cole, I think Squirrel's out with I think he's questionable with a rib injury, and then Brew's got a hand injury.
I think Brew's got a hand injury.
Yeah, Heupel said it's not season ending, but it wouldn't shock me if they miss this week. To your point, they're going to need guys like Caleb Webb, Mike Matthews to step up and chase Nimrod. I remember Nimrod out of high school. It shows how old, or when he was in high school from Arkansas. But my point, I'm going to go my guys to watch. I'm going to go Lance Hurd, the old left tackle. Everybody was
Okay.
hyping up coming over from LSU. He has not lived up to the billing. Again, I think you have to give him a shot in this game. I see some people, they're talking about maybe they're replacing him. I don't know with who. I don't care what his NIL number is. He's got to start preparing better. He's got to start playing better. The offensive line's got to start playing better because Tennessee's at its best when they're going tempo. You've seen it against Oklahoma, and granted, I think that was some strategy we saw with Heupel just trying to get through that game. But then you saw it against Arkansas. They're not going tempo. They're at their best when they are at their tempo. It just is what it is. That starts with the offensive line. That starts with guys like Lance Hurd at the left tackle spot that they thought was going to be a big anchor for this offensive line. So I want to see him this week play well. And for Florida, I'm going to go Tyreek Sapp. Had a good game the other day against UCF. I think this game's going to come down to if Tennessee can't stop the run game against Dylan Sampson in this Tennessee run game. It was solid last week. Again, Arkansas misfit some gaps. But I still think the Tennessee run game is going to be consistent. If Florida can't stop the run game, it's not going to matter about this game. It'll be a blowout, no cover. But if Florida can stop the run game, slow down the Tennessee tempo, make Nico make some passes, potentially without two guys he trusts in Squirrel White and Brew McCoy, you could get this game into the fourth quarter. You could get this game in. And as we saw with the Alabama-Vanderbilt game, again, they didn't just get it in the fourth quarter. Vanderbilt was up. But when you're in a game, you're up, you're just a possession behind, things start to happen a little different from a mentality standpoint, as you know, Cole. Momentum in college athletics, college football specifically, is bigger than in any other sport. If you have a chance going into the fourth quarter, it's just you make a play, I don't, 50-50 ball, it is what it is. I think that's Florida's best. That's what they should hope for, best case scenario heading into Knoxville. Again, I think they have to stop the run game, and I'm making Nico beat me if I'm Ron Roberts and Austin Armstrong. Can they put together two phenomenal defensive game plans back to back?
I'm not going to get ready to sell my stock on Lance Hurd. I talked to some people out in Baton Rouge, and when he entered the transfer portal, I've never seen them get so mad at an offensive lineman. So that's how much they believed he was going to be a difference maker. But this is a game. It's a rivalry. We know what this matchup is. We know how this matchup unfolds. We know what the outcome of these games have been for the last few years. It's a game where this is where you are getting this NIL collective. You're getting a surplus of money to walk away with a win. Let's lock in some predictions, Dave. Kickoff at 6 p.m. Central Time, 7 p.m. Eastern. 15.5 points is the spread. Over under set at 54. I will go first in this one. I think Florida is one of these teams that you're never going to know what version you get. You really aren't. Because even though it was UCF and even though it was Mississippi State, the game plan and the execution that you saw from the passing attack with Graham Mertz, from DJ Lagway, the way the defense kind of stepped up, they didn't allow a lot of explosive plays, that would have worked to keep things close in the fourth quarter against Miami. That would have worked to keep things close in the fourth quarter against against Texas A&M. It would have. The problem is that you can't do it against inferior competition and say, look at all the growth we're making. Look at all the promises we're making. You walked into the year expecting to get wins over Mississippi State, expecting to get wins over UCF, expecting to get wins over Stanford. And you did. You didn't show enough life in those matchups against Miami and Texas A&M. And Tennessee has got to get back on the right course of history. They do. And this is, again, for my money, the most important game of Tennessee's tenure this year. Because if you beat Bama, well, you already showed that you can beat Bama with this style of offense, with Heupel at the helm, with now a revamped defense. And you probably can at least lose to Georgia and still be in the college football playoff. I don't see a scenario where you're 9-3 go to the playoff. And this has been the game that everyone has circled simply because what is it? Is it just like Kirby down at Alabama right now? Is it a Tennessee thing? Is it a Heupel thing? Is it just Florida waking up and choosing violence on this day? What is it? But there is something about losing to Arkansas that kind of sucked the wind out of this matchup for me. Because if I feel like that you're allowed to have a letdown spot, I feel like you're allowed to have a game where you just don't play to your perfect performance, that you kind of get a little bit of humbled. You get a little humility in this matchup. And that's what we saw last week. This is a good Tennessee team. This is a Tennessee team that I have no doubt should be in the college football playoff hunt. I have no doubts that they should still belong in the contender category. Spoiler alert, Volunteer Nation, when I do my tier list this week, Tennessee's still going to be in contender because if I just believe so much on what this defense has shown me, what Dylan Sampson has shown me, I'm ready to see what Mikey Matthews can bring to the table. I'm ready to see what you got in these other passes and these other weapons. I think Miles Kitselman has a phenomenal day across the middle of the field. Florida looks like a good team against bad opponents. They look like the reality of what they are currently right now. Not only do I think that Tennessee rebounds, I think Tennessee wins this game by double digits. I am going to go with the over on this one too at 15.5. Go ahead and hammer that line. I got Tennessee winning this one 45-20.
Yeah, that second half offensively for Florida last week kind of concerned me. Again, they didn't score a single point against a bad UCF defense. I understand they didn't possess the football much, but it kind of looked like they were reverted back to their normal a little bit. The first half, they had their scripted plays. Again, UCF, one of the worst tackling teams, I think, in the country. But I do think this could be a little close in the first half. I could see this game being anywhere from 10 or single-digit halftime lead for Tennessee, something like that. I could see Nico maybe having a big turnover where Florida scores off of it. I could see something like that, especially with him potentially having two of his better weapons, Brew McCoy and Squirrel White being out questionable with hand injury and rib injuries with Squirrel there. I do think the matchups, though, always look at matchups. Try not to go back and look at the last week. I do think Tennessee has such an advantage, though, with their defensive front seven against the Florida offensive line. I think that's where the game will be won. Yeah, could Florida design some runs maybe on the edge? Again, where's Trey Wilson? I mean, he's been banged up. Does he fit in? Do they get something out of DK? And like you said, do they get some out of Elijah Badger? I just don't see a lot of playmakers. I really don't. I could see them getting a couple of chunk plays maybe, but I think overall, Tennessee's going to control the line of scrimmage on that side of the football. I don't think Florida's going to be able to score enough. I'm concerned a little bit with Tennessee's offense because, again, like I said, they're best when they can get up-tempo, when they go up-tempo in teams. I think this game's close at half, but I do think Tennessee gets a break maybe off like a big conversion on like 3rd and 12, 3rd and 15 that puts them up 2 scores. And I think it puts Florida in a bind, and I think Tennessee's off to the races after that. I think the run game will be tough to stop for Florida consistently because, again, I think Tennessee may just go back and watch a little bit of that A&M game again. I mean, I know Florida shut down going into the game. UCF was the number 2 rushing offense in the country behind Army, but I do think Tennessee still with their offensive line issues, the way they spread people out, I think it still is an advantage over the UCF run game. I think at some point, I just think the dam breaks for Florida. I think they're in there. I think they're playing. I think they're in it in the middle of the 3rd quarter, but I think it's just a big play. It just totally sucks the wind, to use that term earlier, out of them. I think we see something like, give me Tennessee. I'm going to go 35-13 Tennessee, and it wouldn't shock me if Florida's score is off some defensive turnover or giving their offense a short field. But I got Tennessee 35-13.
Dave and I both agree that this is a weird year in college football. Vanderbilt beat the number 1 team in the country. Pitt, with a backup quarterback at Alabama, has their best start since 1991. The military schools are both undefeated. Indiana is the first bowl-eligible team. Weird things are happening in 2024, but weird things will not be happening in Rocky Top, where the worst team walks away with the dub. We both agree. Tennessee walks away with the win. They both cover. But let us know in the comment section down below your final score, your overall predictions. Who walks away? Who feels more confident hanging into the 3rd Saturday in October, or Florida's sake, the world's largest outdoor cocktail party? Like, rate, review, subscribe. Follow us on the socials, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at SEC Unfiltered. Follow Dave at Mock10 Sports, me at Mr. Cole Thompson. Download the podcast version of the show. Hit that subscribe button and the ring notification down below. That way you don't miss a single preview, post-game show, live reaction, Dave Talks Ball, Monday Fun Day, Power Hour, Sunday Fun Day, whatever we got coming to you. And make sure that you also check out all of our great work found at SECUnfiltered.com. For Dave Shumate, I'm Cole Thompson. Rocky Top, go Gators. Who cares? Just give us a good game. Peace.